Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Huge drama in the Formula 1 world this morning with both Lewis Hamilton, who almost won the US Grand Prix, and the pole sitter Charles Leclerc disqualified post-race for excess wear on their floor due to running the ride height too low to the ground. Mercedes have explained why this happens and effectively apologised for good reason to Hamilton as a result, but also mass controversy as to why George Russell and Carlos Sainz, the two sister cars, were not even checked to see whether their cars were also considered to be not legal. Loads of controversy today. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Now, this image is taken earlier in the weekend, I think on the Friday. Now, this doesn't necessarily tell the whole story, but it's just a nice image to look at. As we can see, we've got the Ferrari and the Mercedes both sparking. Now, it's not like the Red Bull didn't spark through here, and it's not like sometimes you could easily find a shot of when the Mercedes and the Ferrari were bouncing up and down a little bit through these high-speed corners and find a shot where they weren't actually tapping the ground. But in general, you could see earlier in the weekends that the Ferrari and the Mercedes were running a lower ride height. This was a big talking point back in Spa when going up Eau Rouge Radion, the Red Bull was bottoming out on the floor and they were having to tell Verstappen and Perez to lift off and not even push to the limit going up there, because if they did, they would run the risk of excessively wearing the floor. Now, this weekend, it's going to be a talking point. It's a bumpy circuit at the Circuit of the Americas, and it's bumpier this year than it was last year, and very likely the teams made their decisions on ride height based on some of the data from last year before they got a chance to test it. This is again one of the issues with sprint weekends, is that the teams only got 1 hour and they didn't really have any long running to actually see what the situation would be like. They had to basically guesstimate what the ride height should be before the weekends, and Red Bull guesstimated well, so did McLaren, and the Mercedes and the Ferrari apparently did not guesstimate particularly well. So after the Grand Prix last night, and to be honest, in hindsight, it's probably good that Mercedes and Hamilton didn't win, because otherwise the controversy would have been way more severe than it already was. But as we talked about last night, Mercedes already bottled Hamilton the win with strategy and pit stops and everything, but it turns out they also messed up before the race even began. So it's kind of incredible. Now, Mercedes, here they are turning up to the stewards room. If you're getting, so basically after the race, they were looking into the floor plank wear, and they said that, well, actually, it's worn more than the amount that it's allowed to wear. So there's literally a wooden plank on the floor of the car, and they check it in a couple of different spots to see if it's worn too much. And if it has, then your car is, disqualified. And it doesn't matter what a piece of paper around your shoveling brings. There really is no reason why they're going to be able to get away with this, right? There's really nothing they can say. If it doesn't meet the regulations, it's going to get disqualified. They can say all they want. Oh, it's a sprint weekend. Like, we didn't really know. We tried our best. It wasn't really going to happen. There's nothing you can do. And Ferrari had basically given up here, right? Their representatives were just hitting the vape. They just knew that it was chalked. So, yeah, Leclerc, unfortunately, was also done by this as well. Now, the reason why this happened is because the top 3 cars and also car number, position 6, were checked for to see whether the plank had worn too much. Now, look, this is the rules. I don't think anyone's massively debating the rules. What some people will say is that, oh, well, they look at this very closely, but they don't look at other things very closely. And to be honest, the big controversy on this one, as far as I'm concerned, is, okay, sure, sprint race weekend, we messed this up a fair bit, but also, why not check all the cars? They say they do it randomly. I actually think the reality is they pretty much check the podium, and then they might check 1 or 2 other cars in the rest of the grid. Depends what they're feeling, really. So they check the podium cars. Verstappen got checked, Hamilton got checked, Norris got checked. And if you watch the Grand Prix, it did seem like both Red Bull and, the McLaren did seem to be running at a higher ride height. And, Mercedes probably knew, to be honest, after the sprint that it was going to be touch and go, and they were probably just hoping, because you can't change the setup, right? This is the thing. You make the decision after Friday practice, and from then to the rest of the weekend, your setup is solidified. There's nothing you can do. I honestly think that after the sprint race, they should probably reopen Parc Fermé so they can make changes for the Grand Prix, something like that anyway, because then this situation would have been avoided. But Mercedes and Ferrari probably went into the Grand Prix yesterday knowing there was a chance this happened, and that they were kind of just hoping that it didn't, because if you've set up the ride height in that way, and look, it is going to gain you some extra performance. The amount of extra performance is difficult to say. I think the Leclerc's plank had worn just so marginally more than what was allowed, and it was probably the same with the Mercedes, to such an extent that the performance gain from this would have been seemingly very minor. It would have been substantial, like it would have been significant, maybe worth a second or two over the course of a Grand Prix, but maybe not enough to change the tide of how things went, and maybe it could have been worth more than that. But if it doesn't meet the rules, then the FIA is going to disqualify you. So they checked the cars on the podium, so Hamilton's car got checked, then they also checked the pole sitter. So there's no way that's random. First of all, there's literally not literally zero chance, but the chance that the 4 cars selected are P1, P2, P3, and the pole sitter randomly of all the cars that finished the Grand Prix, very unlikely. So I think we can relatively safely assume they basically check the podium positions. What I think is confusing is when there's now another driver that has been promoted to the podium and also might have had the same issue than Charles Leclerc has, but is not getting looked into, which I find very confusing, to be honest, and we'll discuss that in a second. So, as they say, the skids are located in this area, found not to be in compliance, refer it to the stewards, and the stewards are only going to say one thing: not comply with the rules. That means a disqualification. That's exactly what went on that happened. So, both Hamilton and Charles Leclerc disqualified after the Grand Prix for excess wear on the rear skid of the plank, and even Mercedes admitted that their measurement performed by the technical team was correct and stated that the high wear on the skid pads was probably a result of the unique combination of a bumpy track and the sprint race schedule that minimized the time to set up and check the car before the Grand Prix. So another L for the sprint race format, at least as far as I'm concerned. Not only was the sprint race this weekend terrible, but also on a circuit like this, it means that the teams find themselves in a tricky position, and Red Bull probably went too safe. Maybe Red Bull probably could have gone lower and probably extracted more performance. Also shows just how good the Red Bull is, that Verstappen goes from P6 to win. Okay, it wasn't easy for him, but he made it happen. He had brake issues to deal with, and his ride height was higher than maybe they could have got away with because they wanted to be absolutely as safe as possible. Just shows how good that car still is, even though they're not bringing upgrades to it, is definitely scary. And okay, Mercedes can take some positives away, but fundamentally they messed up again. Not only did they kind of ruin Hamilton's race during strategy and pit stops, everything like that, but they actually ruined his race before it even began because they chose the wrong ride height. And okay, it's obviously their fault for choosing the wrong ride height, but it's not like it's only them that did it. And but still, big mess up here from Mercedes, right? Look, most other teams got it right, but we don't even know if most other teams got it right. And this is the controversy: is that we only got 4 cars checked. 50% of those 4 cars checked got disqualified. Hamilton was disqualified, Leclerc was disqualified, Norris was okay, Verstappen was okay, but only 4 cars checked. The other 13 cars, as we see Philip Horton mention here, were not checked. So either they had good reason to believe that there was nothing else going on, but I just find it very confusing that Sainz has inherited P3. He's got a podium now. Congratulations. Same thing as a couple of other times, hasn't he? Inherited a podium post Grand Prix conclusion. But they decided not to, for whatever reason, check the floor plank on that car. There seems to be, okay, maybe they're different setups, but does the FIA know they're different setups? No, not necessarily. And if they checked Sainz's car, there's probably a very good chance that Ferrari chose a very similar ride height for both Leclerc and Sainz. And there's probably a very good chance that they chose a very similar ride height for Hamilton and Russell. Probably the same ride height, you would think. But because Russell and Sainz's car just aren't checked because, they missed it on the random cut-off, then their car is apparently perfectly fine. This is the thing, where if Hamilton and Leclerc's cars weren't checked at the end of the race, then it would have been perfectly fine for them and no one would have ever known. But, apparently other cars get away with this. This is where people are even when the rules are applied as they are intended to be applied and the regulations are followed as they say they should be followed, there's still controversy because they don't check every car. And it's well, you're just going to disqualify certain cars. Why not others? And Mercedes aren't going to come out and say, oh, yeah, can you check Russell as well? They're not going to do that, are they? Because they don't want Russell to lose his points when there's a fight in the constructors with Ferrari. So, they're not going to say anything. But as Chauvelin says, we are naturally disappointed to lose our podium finish. Unfortunately, one of the pitfalls of the sprint format with the solitary hour of running, without running at race fuel load in FP1, combined with the circuit as bumpy as this and parts of the track where the drivers had to put the car during the Grand Prix, have contributed to the higher than expected wear levels. We'll go away and learn from this. Of course, Hamilton said, I feel positive as we're moving forwards. Even if reflecting on it, we could have possibly won today. Disappointed to be disqualified. Doesn't take away from the progress. And, I think it's good response from Hamilton, but you can imagine how much more annoyed he would have been had they won the race. So, imagine they'd have actually won. and they got disqualified, like the drama would have been next level. It's already pretty big, but this would have been simply next level drama if that had been the case. So, basically Mercedes had to apologize and admitted that, yeah, others got it right, we got it wrong, no wiggle room in the rules. Need to take it on the chin, do the learning, come back stronger. But yeah, not good for Hamilton to have made all that progress, had such a great Grand Prix, and then get disqualified. And Charles Leclerc as well. Like, I mean, yeah, the pain for Ferrari and Leclerc fans really doesn't end, does it? I mean, he goes from pole to P6, Verstappen does the opposite, and then he gets disqualified post-race. It's like, I think Leclerc has now gone from both DNF from pole, DNS from pole, right, in Monaco, and he didn't even start the Grand Prix after getting in on pole, and then DNQ from pole. So congratulations, Charles, you've completed the hat-trick of all possible did-nots from pole position. And that then leaves the final classification like this. So yeah, so much controversy here, right? Obviously, feel bad for Hamilton and Leclerc if their car is not within the rules. That's the way that it works. But it's just, again, the application of the rules feels strangely done when there's other cars, there's other Mercedes, and there's another Ferrari on that grid that are classified, and we don't know whether their car was legal because they simply didn't check the car to see if it was legal or not, but they get to keep the points. So yeah, wild really. So Max wins anyway. Norris is now P2. Sainz inherits the podium. Checo moves up to P4. Then you've got Russell P5, Gasly P6, Stroll P7. So I mean, great points for these guys. Tsunoda, like, I'm happy for Tsunoda, right, that he's up here to P8 now, because I think he also got the fastest lap as well. Great race from him. I also saw that Daniel Ricciardo, he picked up a big piece of debris during the Grand Prix, had some damage to his brake duct and stuff. I think he collided with some of the debris from the Ocon Piastri incident, which I think was affecting his pace quite significantly. So yeah, Tsunoda P8, Albon P9, and Sargent P10. So crazy stuff, but we actually have both Williams here in the points now. Gasly with a P6, Stroll with a P7 out of nowhere. And yeah, Logan Sargent at his home Grand Prix becomes the first American to score points in F1 for 30 years. And I didn't actually mention Sargent last night, despite the fact that he did have a good race. I mean, P12 right behind Albon was, good going given the circumstances. Obviously, the Hasses are absolutely nowhere despite their new apparent upgrades. And with the disqualification, Sargent gets P10. And you could again argue that if Sainz and Russell were looked into, he could have been P8, and like Norris could have been he should have been P2, but maybe Stroll gets P5, right? We just don't know, but that's the way that it goes. So as a result of all this, Perez now has increased his gap on Hamilton to 39 points. So he goes from it going down from 30 to 27 to 19, and then he's up to 39 again. It was 19 after this Grand Prix, but now it's 39. So this is what I said the other day to you guys. That P2 in the drivers, if there is such a thing as, oh, you've got to finish P2 checker or you're going to get fired, it's just so irrelevant because, like, if Hamilton gets, as I said the other day, if Hamilton DNFs or has some issues or his engine blows up or something, then Perez can finish P2 without issue. And basically this is exactly what happens, right? Like, Hamilton's clearly smoking him right now, but gets, the crash in Qatar, and now the disqualification here means that Perez is almost certainly going to hold on now. Okay, 39 points over 4 races is doable, but it's definitely unlikely. So, it's very possible that Checo holds on to this now, which is, not exactly, well, it's fine for him. It's not good for Hamilton, obviously, but it doesn't really tell the entire picture of the story at the moment. Now, just before we close out the video, a couple of things. Firstly, from Max, I don't know if he was actually getting booed on the... Okay, he was obviously getting booed to some degree. I think people were talking about the fact that, like, the governor for Texas was there giving the trophy, and that's who they were booing. But they were probably also booing Max because they tend to, and especially, like, the Mexican Checo fans, stuff like this, they go pretty hard on that. And let's be honest here, right? The Mexican Checo fans are booing Verstappen hard on this one. They are going to be going at next level on next weekend's Grand Prix, you would think, in Mexico itself. So yeah, maybe they just don't know that they're going to power Max up and give him like extra powers to just completely put Checo in the ground next time out in Mexico, but we'll see how that goes. And obviously Max is going to say that I still go home with the trophy, so I really don't care what they're going to say to me. And Mercedes, it seems, trying to brush over this as best they possibly can by confirming that Kimi Antonelli, one of their real stars of their junior program, will be racing in F2. He just won the Formula Regional Alpine Championship, whatever it's called, very comfortably this season with a great drive to to close out the dub. And we thought, okay, is he going to go to F3? Is he going to go to F2? Turns out straight to F2. So yeah, this was rumored a few days ago. Mercedes have now confirmed it and are probably trying their best to sweep this under the rug. But thankfully for Mercedes, it's race week again. Another race week this weekend in Mexico, going straight over there, and they will look to bounce back from what has been a, frankly, disastrous weekend. I mean, for Mercedes to mess up everything during the Grand Prix, apart from Hamilton's driving, and then mess up even before the race started in terms of setup, so they got disqualified. Complete shambles coming off the back of another complete shambles in Qatar. It ain't looking good at the moment. So yeah, very much intrigued your thoughts and all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.